What's the manliest feeling you've ever had? Doing post-winter yard work. A small tree I had planted the year before had died. The ground around it was still soft, so rather than dig it up, I just pulled it out. My right-hand man, my 7-year-old son, looks at me in amazement, runs inside the house, and announces to his siblings, "Dad just pulled a tree out of the ground with his bare hands." The other kids come running out as I'm carrying the tree over my shoulder to the trash, and they are all whoa. It really wasn't a big deal at all, but for a minute there I felt like Hercules, lol. Your son will never forget that moment. Doesn't matter if you explained it to him, why it was so easy. The instant he witnessed it, it was burned into one of his brain drums. I like the imagery that our memory is just a massive, likely disorganized pile of CDs with titles scribbled on them with Sharpie. Walking home from work, 1 AM, a guy comes out of the trees, dressed all in black, and beelines straight towards me. This wasn't me being brave, this was me being dead tired and not in the mood. I made direct eye contact when he was maybe 15 feet away and yelled, "Are we about to have a problem?" He stopped, blinked, then turned back into the trees. Bro used reverse card. I mean, I'd really rather not fight if I don't have to, but God, I was tired, and I really don't think he expected that reaction. I scared a bear out of my car. I'm not a man, but I feel like you probably just won this game. It was a black bear. They are actually sort of timid most of the time. I yelled at it, and it got out the car and ran into the woods. I'm a Louisiana girl. We have them here. I've always been taught to call their bluff, but I know in such a situation I'm just going to wilt, lol. Good on you. That time I changed a flat tire on a deserted highway during a thunderstorm, with only a flashlight and a rusty jack. Felt like a total badass. Even though my hands were shaking from the cold and fear. That's extra impressive how you took the lug nuts off with a flashlight. I've gotten my nuts off before with a flashlight. I live in a mountainous town in California that's not necessarily known for snow. A few years ago, I woke up one morning to snow, and my house cold, like 50 degrees. My furnace was blowing nothing but cold air, so I tried calling the 3 HVAC companies in town. Sadly, they were all booked until the next day. Well, I YouTubed my furnace brand blowing cold air. I instantly found a video how to reset everything, and where to check. By doing so, I was able to fix the problem on my own. Proud man moment. YouTube University saved my as well a few weeks ago when temps dipped to 20s and the heat wasn't working. A light tap on the pressure sensor and the heat fired right up. Mine was a combination of that and snow getting into the plume and blocking airflow. Because the pressure sensor wasn't working, the cold exhaust wasn't melting the snow. As soon as the heat came back, the snow melted, and all was fine. I have since extended my plume, even though it probably isn't necessary. I got into a fight. Didn't go my way, but I felt pretty manly because I didn't cry like I would have if I was still a kid. Making the woman I have a crush on laugh out loud. I still feel the same way when I make my wife laugh. Tell her, bro. Ha. I have, several times. She's 8 years older than me, a traditional Catholic. The only thing traditional about me is my tattoos and 80k a year salary. I don't meet her standards, but I still see her looking my way almost every day. IDK man. Ask her out for drinks or coffee. That's how I made the milfy lady customer who came into my store every day end up liking me enough to marry me 3 years later. Edit. She's 11 years my senior. My wife waited patiently until I got home to ask me to open a pickle jar. Second place is when my oldest son proudly exclaimed to all the kids in the daycare that his daddy was the strongest. This happened to me today. My 3-year-old ran up to her daycare teacher, who is hot, and yelled "Muddy is Philly Fung" several times. She was confused and looked at me, and I sheepishly let her know she's saying her daddy is really strong. I'm jacked. Felt great. The teacher is hot. You are jacked. And your baby mama is? Question mark. I fought off 2 crackheads after they stabbed me to protect my new girlfriend. We are engaged now. Still feeling manly every time I think about it. Wow. I think that deserves a story, my guy. Where did they stab you? We were throwing rocks off a bridge. One of those bridges trains went over to cross a small body of water, and they came up from under the bridge, and apparently they were mad at us for scaring the fish. They told us we made eye contact with them multiple times, but I've never seen them in my life. They start talking. I talk back. One of them swings on my girl, so I pull him off of her and start beating his head. Then I started dragging him to the edge of the bridge to throw him off, and his buddy slashed my back. Then when I turned over, they slashed my chest and tried to stab me, but I dodged, and it cut my arm near my armpit. Then he stabbed my lower left abdomen. They said you just got stabbed, motherfucker. Now what? I had so much adrenaline I didn't feel it, so I said I did. Then they ran. When I started walking towards them again, one of them fell, and it was funny. Thanks for asking about the story, I don't get to tell it a lot. Some guy get hella pissed at me on the road to the point where he cut my off and got out of his car. Note, he tried taking a left from the right lane, and he was completely in the wrong. He got out arms flailing and screaming, and in the moment, I thought about finally using my years of wrestling and BJJ to use, but I had an aha moment and just calmly asked what the problem was, and that the best way to settle this was to just go about our day. IDKY, but he suddenly calmed down, walked away, and like genuinely told me to have a good day. I was like 18 at the time and IDK, but de-escalating a situation with a grown man when I cold easily escalated the situation made me feel a certain calming confidence. We definitely need more of this. Everyone is at an 11 these days. Realizing I could truly be happy alone. Never felt more peace in my life. This is probably the best comment, bro. I cannot tell you the amount of pain, hurt, and financial exploitations I have been through to get to this point. Good to hear it, brother. We had an ice storm and had 5 pine trees fall against the house. None of them did any damage, but they were well over 2 stories tall, around a foot in diameter, and I had to pull them all off, cut them up with a chainsaw, and haul them back to the woods behind the house. I was dirty and sweaty as hell when I was done, but my wife had been watching me through the windows, and when I walked in the house she looked at me like a piece of meat and was all over me. Good times. My girl basically forcing me to stop making her orgasm because she just couldn't handle it anymore. By the time I came back with water she was past the F out. My man. Guns and coffee. No. Her man. Holding my son for the first time. Fatherhood is a great thing. I couldn't imagine life without my kids now. Helping my buddy through his divorce and tackling some of his personal demons. Seeing and hearing how much happier he is in his life makes all the hard hours and difficult conversations worth it. You're a good friend. You should be proud of that. Finally being able to set all of my bills to auto-pay. That's not just a man thing. Every month I pay something online, and it asks me if I want to make it auto-pay. I'm reminded how unstable my bank account is. It's always a decision. What gets paid first? My family belongs to a local pool club. Yes. Douchy. I was hanging in the kid pool area watching my kids, 4 and 5. Some 8-year-old, 7-year-old limit for the kid pool, had a massive squirt gun and was blasting little kids in the face. He squirted my kids, and they said stop. I told him to stop squirting kids, and they swam away. He followed them and did it again. I went in the pool, grabbed the gun, and told him to get out of the pool, and I only give the gun to a parent. I used full dad voice. He ran away crying. A mother came back ready to go full Karen. When I explained what happened, she called me an asshole, took the gun, and said she was getting her husband. He came over, reluctantly, and asked me what happened. I explained again, and he said I don't need to react how I did. I simply said I was protecting my kids. You need to be a better parent. And I just let that hang in the air. He slumped and apologized. My wife said it was one of the sexiest things I ever did, standing up for our kids. That made me feel like a man. When I finally bench pressed 405 lbs. Showed up to one of my wife's female friend's house for a party. This person can be very anti-man sometimes and generally doesn't like men due to a lot of past trauma anyway. I'm chilling out in the backyard drinking beer and talking to some folks I have literally never met before when my wife's friend comes running outside yelling for me. I turn and rushed over and I'm like, what's up? What's going on? She says, I really need your skills. Follow me. I follow her inside to the kitchen where she's pulled a smoked brisket out of the oven. She had apparently bought a whole smoked brisket from a BBQ guy and was keeping it warm in the oven. She looks at me and was like, can you cut this? None of us know how to do it. I know you do. You must. I looked around and there's a bunch of people and several men looking at me and all were completely bewildered. I was, yeah, darling, I got you. Give me a knife, a platter, and 5 minutes. Ever since then I've been known as the meat guy. Carve a turkey, called destructicon, brisket, ribs or chicken. Destructicon doesn't matter if another man cooked it. People are all like, Destructicon cuts the meat. Awesome. I read that final sentence in the Arbez dude voice. Destructicon cuts the meat. I like to do woodworking. 3 years ago I used linseed oil, non-boiled, to make a piece water resistant. Boiled linseed oil, which is the state in which linseed oil is widely used, is said to need to be reapplied every year. This year I tested my finish and it is still waterproof, almost hydrophobic. It was a moment of pride. The S I make lasts a long time. Going for the slow drying stuff that penetrates better was worth the wait. Deadlifting almost 400 pounds in my late 40s, which was appropriately followed by pulling my back on a mere 150 pounds in my 50s. Chopping firewood, feeling like a manly sexy lumberjack man, keeps ya warm twice, sometimes even 3 times. Holding my newborn. Never was I not willing to die and destroy to protect. At a party back in college, my friend got in an argument with some drunk jackass. After a few of us separated them, the jackass grabbed a beer bottle and threw it across the room straight at my friend's head. I just racked it out and caught the bottle midair about 6 inches before it hit my friend's face. Everyone in the room went into a stunned silence. The jackass got a scared shitless look on his face and turned and ran out the front door. Did you look at the label and say, I don't even like Coors, before setting it back down? That would have been funny, but I wasn't very good at coming up with one-liners back then. I had a beautiful and, interestingly enough, rather tall, like towering over me, woman who was working at a Starbucks fawning over me from the minute I walked in. I heard her talking to her co-workers about how cute she thought I was, and I almost think she was purposely doing it loud enough so I could hear. I'm pretty daft, but even I could tell she was talking about me. Her eyes were on me and the body language was evident. Mind you, I consider myself fairly scrawny and short, and I'm not really the kind of guy that type of thing ever happens to. I got my coffee and left Anne. In hindsight, I really regret not asking her out afterwards. I think I rode that high for a few months though, honestly lol. Walking around everywhere like I owned the F place. It was a confidence boost I didn't know I needed until it happened. I mean, sure, I've dated and had women interested in me before, but normally it's something I have to work really hard towards. To have a woman, a beautiful woman, interested in you and overtly expressing it the moment you walk in a room, oh my god. The downside to that experience is that was several years ago and I've been chasing that high ever since, relentlessly self-improving to increase my attractiveness. Believe me when I say I've done a lot of drugs and none of them compare or even really come close to that feeling. I got a taste of what those naturally attractive guys get to go through and I want more. You're not going to believe me because this story is insane. But here we go. New Year's Eve 2005. Boston, MA. It's after midnight. Maybe 1 AM. I'm drunk as F and high on OxyContin, having surprisingly great sex, given the inebriation, with my then girlfriend. We were a couple of punks sharing the world's smallest studio apartment. Mid-thrust I hear the front and only door open. I grab the gun I kept behind the mattress, a .22 air pistol that I used for training, which at best could take down a pigeon. Withdraw from the task at hand. Stand and pivot sporting a raging erection and foot tall pink mohawk. take aim at this motherfucker, and scream some kinda sound that has been in my DNA since my ancestors lived in caves. This guy looks like he is shitting his pants. He turns and runs, but I flip my ass off into its far more functional pistol whipping configuration and give chase. Turns out it was my upstairs neighbor who was so smashed he thought it was his apartment. Whatever that adrenaline dump was, going immediately from having sex to thinking you have to fight for your life, was definitively the most masculine moment of my entire life. Fixing the clothes dryer using my knowledge and reasoning because Google failed me. Sending money for my uncle's surgery. AWW. You're such a good nephew. Saved my niece from drowning. Everyone was distracted and I'm always spectating. If I'm not talking to someone or doing anything, turning my head and seeing she quietly went into the water. I'm pretty tall, so in 2 seconds I was already in the water and she was crying in my hands. Felt pretty manly, haha. Constant vigilance. I fought from a burning tank surrounded by a ton of insurgents all around. And I didn't die that night. I mean, we got out of the tank once the fires cut out all the power. But while we still had power, we were shooting canister rounds. 50 calories. And 7.62 at Maddie militiamen in a day when the QRF got hit and cut off from us when they tried to respond. It was 20 of us, 5 tanks, and about 30 Iraqi army we were supporting. We went to snatch the number 2 in command of Muqtada al-Sadr's Mahdi army, or whatever they wanted to call themselves. The night before 10th group went in to grab him, but they got fucked up by too many insurgents. So we escorted some Iraqi army special forces teams with our tanks. Man, we had to get out and grab the dude ourselves. Once we started getting hit from everywhere with rockets, grenades, and machine gun fire, the Iraqi army dudes F-bounced, so they hit my tank in the number 7 skirt by the batteries and caused an engine fire in my tank. We dismounted when we lost power and maneuvered to the center of the tank formation. Then, since we didn't have a vehicle to get inside of, the 4 of us just went into dude's house, killed all his bodyguards, zip-tied his and dragged him out to the middle of our formation, while the rest of my platoon and my company commander kept fighting insurgents. We held the dude and fought back dismounted for a while, then we each jumped onto the back of the turrets of the remaining tanks and continued to fight until sunrise. 20 of us killed hundreds of insurgents that night, but we were firing a ton of main gun rounds. The streets looked like Swiss cheese the next day. Also, Apache showed up pretty fast and started mowing down tons of dudes that were shooting us from rooftops. And Air Force jets started shooting eye markers on enemy positions for us to just mow down with our machine guns. Anyway, it was like 8 hours of fighting, and my tank was completely destroyed from the fire. After the adrenaline wore off, I felt absolute terror to have survived what I should not have survived. But once the terror wore off, I felt like I had 10-pound balls. I mean, there was zero hesitation once the adrenaline hit. I was just in a battle trance. Move, shoot, communicate, move, shoot, communicate. Target goes up, target goes down. It was such a single-minded focus, and I no longer felt like a boy after that experience. I was 20 years old at the time, not even old enough to buy beer, when I was on mid-leave the prior month. Lol. I don't give a flying monkey F about what anybody else says in this post. You effin' win it.